President Cyril Ramaphosa has reportedly convened a secret two-day meeting with leaders of political parties in the Government of National Unity. The Sunday Times saying the gathering will wrap up tomorrow. Delegates were reportedly invited without a formal agenda and were reportedly instructed to keep the event private, underscoring the sensitivity of the discussions. Nelson Mandela University Center for the Advancement of Non-Racialism and Democracy's Professor Bheki Mngomezulu joining us now to try and make sense of what this gathering really is about. Good evening to you, Professor, and thank you for your time. A secret meeting with no particular agenda, and this is to try and keep the media away. Firstly, what do you make of this meeting? If you read that article, you'll notice that some of the party leaders are saying that this has been long in the making. This is what they have been yearning for, and it's good that it has finally taken place.
Good evening, Butloli, and good evening to your viewers. First of all, yes, indeed, a meeting of this nature is necessary. But then I would say that it's too little, too late, because the damage has already been done. In fact, the damage was done from day one when this combination of parties was put together. So one would have expected that they will have regular meetings, particularly because they don't seem to agree on many policy issues. And then, of course, you know, there was what has been happening in KwaZulu-Natal, where this coalition is in jeopardy. So then we would expect that they will have these regular meetings. So the fact that they are having a meeting now is in fact a commendable step. But then, as I say, they should have done this early. So it's too little, too late. We have local government elections coming next year. So then what are we going to achieve at this tail end of the process? Yeah,
the article goes further, quoting Corne Mulder of the Freedom Front Plus, the leader of that party, saying that actually how this government of national unity, how it should work, is that it should be led from the political party perspective, as opposed to be run through the government, meaning the union buildings. Do you agree with that, that it is political parties that should be at the front of this, setting laws, agendas, particularly this country's foreign policy outlook, given the conflicts we seem to have engaged in? Do you agree with that sentiment, or is the order of how government is run completely fine, that whoever is part of the government takes the lead from the president?
But let us get the basics right. When the Freedom Front Plus joined this coalition, a multi-party coalition, what did it sign up to? If it had those questions, why were those questions not asked from day one? Because if you form a coalition, the understanding is that you are going to forego some of your policies, and then you will have a consensus on what policies the government is going to push during that particular time. Why didn't they have that discussion in the first place? Unless then we agree with John Steenhuisen of the DA that when the DA joined the coalition, they joined it for one reason and one reason only. That was to keep the MK party and the EFF away from the union buildings. So then the same question then could be asked to the Freedom Front Plus. When they joined this multi-party coalition, what was their agenda? What did they hope to achieve? If they are not happy from day one, why did they agree to be part of the coalition? Those are some of the critical questions. For them to come now and argue that there should be a clear distinction between a party and government, that argument is valid, but it's misplaced because it comes later after the coalition has been in place since June last year. We are now almost at the end of 2025. Why didn't they raise the issue long before this time?
I'm glad you mentioned parties that are not GNU partners. You've already mentioned the MK party, the EFF as well, because the understanding, well, at least based on the article, is that there could be a proposal to expand the GNU in order to include parties such as the EFF. If that indeed does happen, you've already stated the DA's standpoint as to whether or not the EFF should be part of this. They're totally opposed to it. If there is insistence that they be joined as GNU partners, do you think that things are going to fall apart?
Putkole, let's start here. There are coalitions that are formed before the elections. Those are called the pre-election coalitions. They have a propensity to survive, particularly because you are able to then negotiate your manifestos and then find common ground even before you go to the elections. Then we have a second type, which is called post-election coalitions. Those are necessitated by the results of the election. This is where we are. The multi-party coalition that we currently have was formed after the election, so therefore it falls under the post-election coalitions. So, and it was done in a rush, by the way, which is why there are these cracks. But to answer your question, on the one hand, you have the DA saying that they wanted to keep the EFF and the MK part away. On the other hand, you have the EFF being clear that for as long as the DA and the Freedom Front Plus are part of this multi-party coalition, they are not going to be part of it. But then we have heard also a couple of months ago, the ANC coming up with this proposal that they want to expand this coalition. Then the question is, when the ANC announced that it wants to expand the coalition, did it first discuss with other coalition partners or did it take a unilateral position?
Yeah.
So the answers we get to those questions will then answer this question then as to whether this proposal will be presented and then what the reactions will be. Because if the agreement from the start was that no decision will be taken until all the other parties have agreed, then it means that the announcement will only come after those parties have discussed, and then they would call a multi-party media briefing so that we get a sense that they are reading from the same script. At the moment, they are not.
We'll talk in a moment as a final question to you about President Ramaphosa's longevity in this second term, because that seems to be something that is rumored to not last for too long. But before we get there, so we were talking GNU at a national level. At provincial level, things seem to be coming to a head in KZN. The NFP says it's lost confidence in Premier Tamintuli. The IFP has to recall him. Is that a principled stand? Because it does appear that this is possibly something more personal than how Mr. Ntuli is running things, in particular with the government of provincial unity in KZN. Or am I simplifying things a little too much? Let's remember, the NFP is a breakaway of the IFP. And the understanding, or at least my assumption, is that Ivan Barnes, the president of the NFP, might know things that we may not necessarily be aware of as someone who previously would have been part of the IFP. Am I wrong?
You are not necessarily wrong, Putkode, but there are two issues here. On the one hand, you have an assessment of the performance of the current Premier, Mr. Tamintuli. According to the NFP, through its leader, Evan Barnes, he says that the Premier is not performing well, and then he accuses him of a lot of other things, including mismanagement, a lack of accountability, and a couple of other things, which could be understood that if his assessment is correct, then he has a case. But there is another issue to this. There was a misunderstanding between the NFP and the IFP. As far as the NFP was concerned, the agreement that the NFP and the NFP and the IFP reached was that they were going to have some deals at the provincial government level, and they were also going to have deals at a local government level, specifically the position that was previously held by MEC, Cocta MEC, that is Reverend Tula Sezo Buthelezi. So the NFP then was under the impression that when Thulasizwe Buthelezi moved from that mayoral position and went to the KZN legislature, that position will be given to the NFP and specifically to Evan Barnes. According to the IFP, there was never any agreement to that effect, so which means therefore that there was a misreading of the situation. So you have a government issue that is concerning the performance of the premier, but you also have that a one-on-one issue between the NFP and the IFP, which has nothing to do with the other political parties that are part of this a multi-party coalition, which they call a GPU. So there are two issues, and then the third one we are bringing in is that there could be information that Evan Barnes is privy to, which you and I might not know, but is one of the possibilities that he might be reading things based on what he knows, and then we are only looking at issues from a macro level, which is us looking at it from a distance. All those are possibilities.
Of course, not discounting also the possibility that the MK party could be salivating, sitting in the wings, getting itself ready to run government in KZN. All right, let's conclude the conversation with the rumor, because I think that's how the article has put it, the Sunday Times article, that is, that the president could potentially say that he's done running government as early as next year. And part of that is that he is tired of being second-guessed by people such as former President Thabo Mbeki. I suppose you could say the issue of the national dialogue may be one of those. I mean, that was very, very public, the disagreement there. Do you think that there is some truth to this? There could be some credence to this, that the president is possibly tired?
Two issues, Butkoli. The first one, former President Thabo Mbeki has not been mincing his words about his dissatisfaction, about his own party, how things are run, how things are done. And in fact, I was with him the whole day yesterday when we were discussing something else related to the national dialogue, specifically focusing on the higher education sector. He's not happy about a lot of other things. That is a fact. But then there is another issue which regards the president, like you just said. In 2022, following the Phala saga, the president resigned.
Yeah, we know that. And we know that for a fact now, because Gwede Mantashe, the chairperson of the ANC, let it out. If it's not him, it's Fikile Mbalula that we had to beg
Yes, it's Mbalula.
It was Mbalula.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, we know for a fact that the president resigned. And by the way, I was with one of your media houses on standby when the president was going to address the nation. And then we were told there was a delay. There was another delay. And then the last call was that, no, by the way, this has been now rolled out, so it has been cancelled. And then Balula helped us with more information, saying that the president resigned, but we as the ANC, we told him, not now. We will tell you when the time is right. Unfortunately, then, you have people who move with the line. If they see this line is moving slowly, they jump to the other line. What I'm saying here is that there are people who have been fully behind the president. The same people who told the president not to resign could be the same people who say he must resign because he has nothing more to offer, given that this is his second and last term. And then they will be looking elsewhere for support. And that is very strange in terms of global politics, but it's not strange in terms of African politics, and more especially South African politics. So I wouldn't rule out then the possibility of the president resigning. Then, of course, those who defended him last time, they might not be willing to do that this time around because they have very little to gain from him, given that he's already on the exit door. So if he leaves, it would not be because he wants to leave, but it will be because those who protected him last time are now okay with him leaving because he has nothing more to offer.
And how interesting an environment that would be as to whether or not the GNU stays together. But it's a conversation for another day.
It will collapse, definitely. It will collapse because the DA was clear. They were part of the coalition for as long as Ramaphosa was there. With Ramaphosa not there, then of course this multi-party coalition would fall apart. and then maybe they can have a real GNU, because what they have now is just a multi-party coalition, not a GNU. With Ramaphosa gone, there could be a possibility of a real GNU. We'll wait and see.
Professor Bheki Mngomezulu, thank you very much for your time and thoughts. Very, very interesting indeed. He's with the Center for the Advancement of Non-Racialism and Democracy at the Nelson Mandela University.